Now I'm going to begin by asking asking you in the floor if you would like to ask questions of the panel. We'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then I'm going to ask each of the panel will reply, or individual members of the panel will reply, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to make a statement at the end of the conference about what they think. I mean, what we've learned about Bauer and Peter Bauer, and what lessons we take forth from here, or indeed any other reflections that they have. So in the first instance, may I ask people in the audience if they would like to put questions to individual members of the panel or to the panel as a whole? Now, come, a moment ago you were all eager. A gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Tom Szigeti from Hungary today. My question is really for Professor Bode and for President Klaus. We're talking a lot about sort of EU funding being good or bad. In countries such as, I guess, specifically Hungary, where, I mean, it's not political because it's just a reality. I mean, we have issues that have come into light, Mészáros Lőrinc, Tiborcs, et cetera. I mean, talking about it, sorry. I mean, isn't it a bit of a moot point? We're talking about are EU funds good or bad? I mean, when there isn't essentially a tradition of sort of stable or good governance, I mean, it seems to be a bit of a moot point, no?
Is the free money good if you have good governance? Is it only bad if you have bad governance?
It's bad in any case, you know. I think people from the former communist countries know that our radical economic transformation, not done in Hungary, I would dare to say. There was no real transformation done in Hungary. But it really was to liberalize, deregulate, desubsidize, privatize. So for us, the arch enemy were the subsidies. So we succeeded in practically eliminating all the subsidies very rapidly in our country. And now, entering the EU, we are again doing the same mistake as in the past. So we are very much against those subsidies. And I don't believe that there are some good infrastructure projects. Maybe in Hungary is probably able to deal with the EU more efficiently than the Czech Republic. Most of the money which come to the Czech Republic in the form of EU grants are money for small villages making the bicycle roads, you know, around the village. This is the main example of EU money. Absolutely useless, absolutely unnecessary. It has no economic value, no economic meaning. Crazy things, skiing lifts done in a place where there is no snow, or almost impossible to go down because you have to help the slope, you know. Those are the EU projects finance, and especially for us the co-financing is almost difficult to overcome. I understood that co-financing depends on the GDP per capita, and I know that Hungary has no co-financing obligation, whereas the Czech Republic has. So for us, we have many institutions which would be happy to get the EU grants, but they are not able to make the co-financing, which I understood is not the Hungarian case.
Thank you. Peter.
Well, this is a complex issue, and we heard a simple answer. But it's easy to solve. Don't accept. Why do you accept the money? Because the Czech Republic does accept money. So it's easy to get rid of the issue. Now, if you do accept EU money, so you don't reject out of hand, then it's the big issue how to spend it. Can you spend it more efficiently and more transparent? Now, I'm in a strange situation because I'm on the media day and night criticizing the government for the vices committed, and therefore now I should change hat and defend partly. Because partly, since the central planned economies with very different technical norms, environmental norms, join a club. And the club has an acquis communautaire, and when we joined it was 60,000 pages. And when you join the club, you have to accept it, period. So therefore, you have to invest into the transition to get ready for absorbing it. So therefore, I think partly the Western community contributes to the cost which is incurred by the fact that we have to leave behind and institutions, learn new institutions. There's some sort of initial investment. Point one. The point two, soft money is always dangerous. I, as an economist, I'm not too happy, but I also see that transfer within society and other transfers between countries can be managed in very different ways. So some societies are corrupt, others are less corrupt. The same transfer, which does not destroy the competitiveness of Sweden and Denmark, which has a very high ratio of grouping of fundings. Still, Sweden and Denmark, Finland are competitive. They belong to the core, and some other countries are less transparent. So my middle of the road attitude to things, that if you have cheap money available to you, and if you do accept it, well, if you don't accept it, it's a different story, but if you do accept it, then try to spend it efficiently and usefully. And then I start criticizing my government because I don't want to repeat the names, but these names are very known to Hungarians, that one winner always, and then of course that's cronyism, and that's something I hate. Being on the supervisory board of the Transparency International Hungary, which I joined a year ago or two, when the government started to demonize civic societies, I thought that's my duty to join the club, which is unpaid job, and I'm not on the pay list of George Soros, whom
I think we are drifting away here.
whom I met once in my life. Unlike some of those who criticize George Soros for being George Soros. Okay, so I see differences, and I have to admit, blushingly, that Poland, with all the problems, is less corrupt, and the spending of EU monies is more efficient. So still there are differences in the attitude to things. So I'm in this point, the middle of the road.
I was going to say that. Sure.
I just wanted to make one point, that we are dreaming about next year, 2019, when the Great Britain will go out of the EU, and at that moment the Czech Republic will have the GDP per capita above the EU average, so we will not be getting any money. So that would be the miracle for us.
You know,
oh yes, please.
What I've learned on this day is what I learned from Bauer, which is that free money is very dangerous. And it's a very elementary point in economics. If you look, imagine what would happen to what would have happened to anyone in this room if at age 18 you had inherited $12 million. What kind of a person would you have become? You would not. I would have done exactly the same thing, of course, but it would be terribly corrupting. And I've known people of that character. I knew the grandson of J. Paul Getty with an interest in economics who didn't ever face an exam in economics because he didn't have to. So I think it goes right down to the level of our children. Children, small children, need to be subsidized. You need to give them free money. You don't charge your children for lunch. Even Milton Friedman did not do that. But so then gradually, as they get older, you give them more autonomy, and you let them earn their own way. And if you keep corrupting them, if you keep regulating them, socializing them, bringing them into your little, that's bad love. That's not good love. They don't end up as autonomous people. Now, I think that can apply, and I think it has been applied in this conference to this wonderful story that the Marshall Aid was used to buy cigarettes, for presumably Virginia tobacco. So we Americans got an advantage from it. Hey, good for us. That's a subsidy to the American tobacco industry, and a ridiculous expenditure like these bicycle paths you talk about on the British side. So I think that was his main point. It's not just foreign aid, as we've discovered, talking about it this morning and this afternoon. It's all kinds of subsidies, all kinds of regulations, all kinds of, no, dear, don't do that. No, here's some money internally in Italy. And I was very interested in the claim, I think you're right, that East Germany was spoiled, was corrupted. That's my main thought for today. I offer it to you free, which is very dangerous.
I think from now on we're going to have to charge for people attending the conference. Would any other speaker? Oh, yes.
Marshall Plan was mentioned here several times this morning, positively. We know many German studies which argue how irrelevant the Marshall Plan was. That's one point. But the other point, the most famous German economist, Professor Sinn from Munich, probably you may know him, and he made an empirical studies some 2 years ago saying that the EU aid to Greece is 38 times bigger than the Marshall Plan, which is a fascinating story and which should give some information to many people.
I've long made this point without making it very prominently, but I've always thought the Marshall Plan is grossly exaggerated, as is the success, by the way, of the Manhattan Project. These famous examples provide excuses for centralization and for subsidies to this and that person.
But applying the logic that's been advanced, the subsidy to Greece doesn't really go to Greece, does it? It goes to the various banks and international agencies to which Greece owes money. So it's a kind of washing machine approach. Good. Would anyone else from the floor, would anyone else on the platform like to respond so far? In that case, let me ask for the next question.
It's me.
Oh, you?
I'm wondering, do y'all have an opinion on the One Belt, One Road initiative, where China is spending a lot of money? Is this good, bad?
Yeah, I have an opinion about it. I've been in China for as long as 3 weeks. I'm an expert on China. I know 20 Chinese characters. Now, of course, you need 3,000 in order to be able to read a newspaper, but still, it's a start. No, but I think that the Great Belt is a very strange project. You're going to have a railway between China and Europe or Turkey or somewhere. And one container ship contains more than the Great Belt will able to have the capacity for a month. Just think of it. A 100-car train is a long freight train. These large container ships contain 8,000 or 10,000 cars. 8,000 or 10,000. So it's a crazy project. I'm also very dubious about the high-speed rail. Spain bought a lot of high-speed rail at German interest rates, which I'm going to ride on in a few days between Barcelona and Madrid. It's very nice for me. But I think the high-speed rail in China is simply amazing and crazy. But it's the government that's the problem in China. It's the free money of the government. You tax people, then it's suddenly free money, and you can spend it on all kinds of crazy things. Anyone else got an opinion about the Great Belt?
Anybody from the platform who wants to respond? No? In that case, there's a gentleman at the back.
Well, we talked about the fund flows, the grants, regional assistance programs from the EU to the poorer countries, but there's another aspect or another element in fund flows, and that's the remittances from the West European countries, mostly by immigrants or call them what you like, temporary workers who are sending money home. And in the case of Hungary, that's about 3 billion euros or dollars a year.
How much is it in GDP?
About 3 billion euro.
How much is it in GDP?
It's 2 or 3% of GDP. It's and when you take, in addition, you take that plus the money from the EU that's official, the foreign aid from the EU, that's about 5 or 6% of GDP.
Yeah, but
sorry, I just want to put it to the panel that Hungary is not unique in that Poland gets more money, although perhaps a small proportion of GDP, but it's an important source of funds for the poor countries, and it takes money out of the richer countries in Europe.
yeah, but the extremes case is Cuba, with enormous, very large in percentage of GDP coming from Miami. But if it's your uncle who's sending you a check or money, that's targeted subsidy to you as a young person, And oh, my niece is a very nice person and she wants to go to medical school here, I'm going to give her some money. Whereas you hand it to the government, to the central government way up here, and they spend it on bicycle paths or cigarettes.
In fact, those remittances reduce the power of elites in the central government, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. That's a very good point.
Another famous development economist next to Peter Bauer is Deepak Lal, the famous Indian guy. And in his last book, he makes a very strong argument saying that the remittances all over the world are many, many times higher than the government-to-government aid, which is something very important. I came last Monday from Guatemala, and when I spoke with the president, the vice president, I asked when they spoke about the remittances, and I asked what's the share, and they told me 12% of GDP remittances in Guatemala. This is a substantial amount, which is incomparable to what the World Bank is giving to Guatemala. If you say that it's 1.5% in Hungary, it's much lower in the Czech Republic. We have no immigrant workers all over the world as compared to Poland and Hungary, almost zero. Everyone stays at home in my country.
Okay. Alberto.
I was just holding the mic. I was just holding the mic.
Just holding the mic. The other thing, no, wait a second. The idea has flipped from my mind. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
Well, if I need to talk while holding the mic to pay for my lunch, in a way, I think this argument really brings us back to the problem of aid as seen by Bauer.
Yeah.
The problem of aid is not necessarily, it's not a problem to counter a flood. It's not problem with aid that comes in emergency situation. It's not problem with gifts necessarily, even though you got the situation of the 45 years old guy who was just living on gifts by his mother. But this is his own problem. The problem is with the strings attached. The problem is with the idea, you're not just giving people money. I mean, in a sense, it's the same reason why when we talk about welfare reform, most of us will favor giving people cash instead of giving people services. I mean, if you need to choose, it's much better to give people money to waste it in their own way than trying to nudge them in a way or another, simply as a matter of prudence. Because people may have many wrong ideas, but in as much as you have a great amount of ideas, some of them may turn out to be good. But if you put all your eggs in the same basket and you go for compulsory industrialization or a bridge to nowhere or anything like that, you really put yourself in the position of potentially jeopardizing the future of one country. And I think, there are lots of temptation that come from time to time in that regard. And one is infrastructure. The Juncker plan, this idea that we are back in the 30s and you can have an alternative to the Tennessee Valley project. And most of the time, people come up with broadband. We spend plenty of money for broadband in Calabria this time. I suppose it is wonderful for people to have who are unemployed these days to be able to benefit from high-definition porn movies on their laptops and iPads. That's really making their lives much better. But broadband by itself will not foster, economic development, as roads didn't before. Not a libertarian economist, but a very good economist, Vito Tanzi, told me once, I always prefer, current spending to capital spending for a very simple reason. At least current spending, I can identify the beneficiaries quite easily. Instead, when we are funding capital, it's a little bit muddled through. I also wanted to add something, and the big problem in all of these debates is that, of course, when we have this kind of discussion, you oversimplify a bit, and you do have cases of success, that's for sure. With the amount of money that was spent by government in the last 50 years, it will be impossible not to have some case of success. And you can always say that, of course, you do have countries that are clearly much better than others. These countries tend to share a few characteristics, a certain culture. They're very small in size. But the point, I think, is what you think your job is. And it's really the time frame you're working with. If you're working with a very short time horizon, I think it's completely good that you try, to smoothen things and make them a bit better. Also suggesting people how to adopt perhaps a slightly better practice. But all in all, I think that the job of a social scientist is reasoning by institutions. And when we think about institutions, institutions are not there for good people. If we had good people in charge, everything will go smoothly. But we need to reason by the fact that most of the time we will get bad people in charge. And if we need to, attempt to design institution, we need to attempt to design them for, the many, many moments in history in which, I would say, not necessarily bad people, but normal people, power maximizers, people that care about their own wealth. You know the famous, I don't want to compete with on Soviet jokes in this panel, but I always thought it was pretty amazing, the one with Brezhnev, inviting his mother to see his dacha and, seeing his cars and all of that. At a certain point, his mother looks around and says, well, this is all impressive, but what's going to be happening when the communists seize power? So in a way, you do have the same incentive of over. I mean, one great point Milton Friedman made plenty of times was that, people are as greedy in any sort of social arrangement. So institution, if we want to design them, should be there basically to avoid the worst case scenario. And sometimes institutions are not enough. You need culture, you need civil society, you need magazines and reviews and a whole bunch of things which are really, this was one of the messages of Bauer, are very really difficult to build overnight. So you won't get into the culture context, which is conducive to development or to, reasonably honest governance. I don't dare to say honest governance per se, because I think it doesn't exist. But reasonably over governance, you cannot develop that architecture overnight.
I know, Anthony, you wanted to say something.
It's a very small point, but in some African countries, private transfers of goods can do harm, of money can do harm as well as public. Because, for example, in Tanzania, it was regarded as, it became regarded as important that children should be educated in order that they can get into the exploiting classes of the government. And many of the transfers were to secure education for people to join that class, and that only made things worse. Education of that kind in Africa was very harmful.
Well, that's true of education historically. The Chinese exams, which went for 2,000 years, were to join the bureaucracy. And the same of most education in Europe until really the 19th century, until the University of Berlin was again to join the bureaucracy, to speak Latin and so forth. But it occurred to me what I was going to say a few minutes ago, which is trade, not aid. It's been calculated that if Europe would drop its objection to imports of agriculture from Africa, that would give more aid to Africans. 10 times, I think was the calculation, 10 times more improvement of the ordinary African than all the aid from Norway and Britain and France and so on.
Just on the education point, there is an additional one, isn't there? I remember Gordon Brown, in trying to deal with the argument that aid had produced perverse and bad results, said that he agreed with a lot of the criticisms, but he now wanted to direct aid to education because he thought that was a way in which there would be no bad side effects. But those of us who occasionally have run into people at the Mont Pelerin Society, I can't remember the name of the man, but there's somebody from that organization who has successfully set up small private sectors.
James Tooley.
James Tooley, that's right. Private schools, financed by quite small payments by the parents. And he makes the point that those schools become very difficult to sustain when the government gets a lot of money to pay for expensive schools, even though the expensive schools are very often staffed by relatives of local members of the elite who have contempt for the parents, the poorer parents, and whereas the poorer parents feel if they're paying even a modest sum, they've got a reason for complaint if their children aren't learning. So, I mean, for all kinds of reasons, these interventions are not as successful as we might hope. I'm going to ask for one more question. Is there another question? And I'm going to, thanks. And before you ask the question, let me say, I would like everyone to reply to the question and add his or her final remarks at the end of this conference, and with thanks from me. But question first.
David Carestas from Central Europe Trust, by the way. As a follow-up to Melissa's question earlier regarding the Belt and Road Initiative, which has been, from the Chinese, which has been compared to sort of a new Marshall Plan. Obviously, the Chinese have been active in Africa for years with regard to natural resources as well as infrastructure development. More recently, acquiring what are considered strategic industries, or at least trying to, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and other high-tech areas, some of which acquisitions have been blocked recently by the U.S. and other administrations. And I'm interested in your views on that issue. Chinese quasi-state, uncertain in many cases who are the ultimate beneficiary owners of the entities trying to make the acquisitions. Interested in your views on that.
Let me just reiterate, if you would like, we'll start at the end with Norman responding to the question, but also then adding any remarks that he wants to make at the end of the conference.
If I can be forgiven, I'm outclassed here, and I've been learning.
Come now. Oh, no, come on, come on.
No, I mean, I followed the story of these high-speed rail. I mean, but I was hopelessly naive. I didn't realize that container ships was so much more efficient. But you know, I know only one Chinese character, and it's it's the word for stone. So I really am outclassed on this.
In that case, just proceed to your final remarks for the day, Norman.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been splendid. It's one of the best events I've ever been at. I've learned much.
That's the right answer.
I can just say about the scones, you betray your Glaswegian heritage.
It's my turn to answer. Well, I want to answer. You know, when it comes to China, I cannot really give any meaningful answer. I remember a friend of mine told me once that, you know, you spend one day in China and you want to write a book on China. You spend 1 week in China and you want to write an article on China. You spend 1 month in China and you want to read other people's books on China. It's really a complex place. When it comes to strategic industries, and you know, we have lots of examples of cross-border acquisition even in Europe. As an Italian taxpayer, my typical remark is that I'm never opposed to the French taxpayers subsidizing us. And that happens, you know, quite a few times. But you know, the definition of a strategic business is basically what the government in a certain moment in history believes it's strategic. And most of this definition of strategic business tends to be tremendously short-lived, at least in Italy. I suppose that, you know, if I second the comment, I thought it was a splendid day, and I'm very grateful to John and Melissa for putting it together. And I'm very grateful for President Klaus, because in his speech he pointed out the many parts of Bauer's thinking that we didn't consider. Another very important part of Bauer's thinking we didn't consider is Bauer on overpopulation, for example. He consistently opposed the Malthusian doom and gloom for many years. But I think one of his lessons that President Klaus pointed out was that Bauer was adamant, and I think Tony Daniels did the same. Bauer was adamant on a misuse of language. In a way, I mean, the way in which you use words frame the debate by itself. I mean, people are attempting to frame the debate on one way or another. And of course, Dieter has written a great deal on the rhetoric of economics. So I think, you know, one big lesson by Bauer is do not surrender to other people's words. Do not necessarily accept them, because even when you're accepting some words, you're implicitly giving the moral high ground to your opponents and the opponents of a free society or the market economy or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, simply calling it foreign aid makes it sound really nice. So you're going to give some aid. On the Chinese threat, which is how people think of it, remember that there was once a Japanese threat. And look what happened to that. We were able to sell Rockefeller Plaza to the damn Japanese, which was a terrible thing for them to do. And we gave them lots of green pieces of paper and IOUs expressed in dollars. And then the dollar depreciated 50% against the yen, et cetera, et cetera. It was, as you just said, I was delighted that the Japanese would give us Toyotas in exchange for a little bit of soybeans. Sounded good to me. So that they invest in Africa. Look, they build a railroad in Kenya. That belongs to Kenya. You can say as long as the Kenyans pay their bills, it's belonged to by the Chinese, but anytime they want, the Kenyans can say, so sorry, this is my railway now. So, but what I've learned, I've already said, that this very simple economic idea that free money is corrupting is, I think, the heart. Well, you know, we used to say at Chicago, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I think that's a kind of adult way of looking at the world, and it's for adults. Children and, you know, people who are sick, and where there's an earthquake or something, we've got to help them. Then the aid makes sense, because it has no incentive effects. Otherwise, I think you ought to, as you expressed, you ought to, you know, how's the phrase go in English? Sit on your own bottom or stand on your own legs or something. That's much healthier.
Well, I have really no additional arguments, and I think that the law of diminishing marginal returns is functioning here very, very strongly, and I don't want to say something with negative marginal returns. So thank you very much for bringing me here.
Well, this was not an invitation to speak more now. I try to keep quiet on this one belt, one road thing because I have not been to China. And the other thing is that next week, 2 weeks from now, I have to sit for a conference next to the Chinese ambassador to Hungary and comment on the things, and I will be the odd man out, oddbod, so to say, because we have one major project in Hungary, the railway, high-speed railway connecting Belgrade and Budapest through the Hungarian Puszta, Pampas, or Steppe. Now, I'm a bit uncertain about its profitability, and there are two statements from very important person. I wouldn't name the person. One, he said that it will not pay ever, because the payback time is 200 years or something like that. But it doesn't matter because it's important in itself. And second, he said that we don't have to pay for that because it's on loan. Now, we borrow from China. The Chinese will build the rail for themselves, and we don't have to pay now. Yeah, it sounds great. Okay, so I try to figure out what I will say in this conference, sit next to the Chinese ambassador, that I, as a Hungarian, have mixed feelings about this concept of borrowing to China to build a high-speed train to bring Chinese product to Western Europe to our friends who will love us. Okay, but what I wanted to comment on the series, because I'm not the Chinese expert, the government, some governments, okay, it's okay. Some governments, well, not the Czechs, but and others, love huge projects. And that's some sort of rent-seeking activity by the government, actually. And then they fell in love, and some governments fell in love with huge projects, be it a nuclear power station financed by the Russian. Okay, let's change subject and saying that I'm a bit suspicious of huge government-financed projects because they would push an open economy into the wrong direction. And whenever I can say, I raise my voice, but this is not the audience to speak about. We'll have an election 2 weeks from now, and we'll see.
Thank you very much. Tony.
Thank you. Well, your question is so complex that I can't answer it. But I will finish with Peter's immortal thoughts, which he always expressed as his toast, death to our enemies.
Well, I want to thank all of the members of the panel, because I think this has been more like a cabaret at times than a serious conference, and yet the issues, the serious issues, were seriously dealt with and discussed, but just much more entertainingly than usual. So I want to end with a quote from Peter, actually. He was trying to explain to me at one point how the oppression represented by late communism was really quite different to the oppression of the 30s communism and the 40s. And he said, well, I'll tell you, and I'm the second person to tell a communist joke here, and I'll tell you the story. He said there is a train traveling through Siberia with Stalin, Khrushchev and Brezhnev in it. And it runs out of gas or whatever, coal, and is stranded there. Stalin says, I'll handle this. He gets up, he goes out of the compartment, returns a few minutes later and says, I've just shot the driver. So the train with the new driver presumably starts again, but it soon stops. So up gets Khrushchev and says, I'll handle this. He goes away out of the compartment, he comes back and he says, I've rehabilitated the driver. And the train goes on for a while. Then it stops the third time. Brezhnev says, I know how to handle this. He gets up. But instead of going out of the compartment, he draws the curtains. Then he sits down and he says, now, the train is moving. And that is, in a way, the kind of society that is produced in the end by socialism, whether of the oppressive, openly totalitarian kind, or whether of the more gentle but equally inefficient social democratic kind. And I think Peter saw many of these things, all of those things, but he didn't just see them in socialism or in communism, he saw them in the mixed economy societies of Western Europe and the United States, and in their relations with countries of the Third World. He therefore introduced many novel, but at the same time fundamentally correct insights of economics, economic thought, and he applied them to these situations. As the discussion has demonstrated again and again today, we are deeply in his debt, and we are all also deeply in the debt of our 6 distinguished contributors, and I'd like to thank them all on your behalf. I would also like to thank my colleagues at the Danube Institute, Naomi Karani, our director, Melissa, my deputy director, Violet, and our new assistant, Susan Dansby, who is happy. And I finally want to repeat my thanks from earlier to the other organizations which made this possible and have helped us put it on. So I think we've all had an extremely educational, entertaining experience, and I think we'll be putting this, as soon as we've got the video up, we'll be putting it online, and we'll be sending it to, among other people, Professor Yemi, whom I mentioned was Peter's great collaborator. Thank you very much indeed.